On October the 12th, Dmitry Bivol will fight Beterbiev to determine who is the undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world. Both boxers boast stellar records, with Beterbiev having never had to wait for the judges' scorecards, winning all 20 of his bouts by knockout, while Bivol sits undefeated in all 22 of his fights, most notably having battered Canelo in his attempt to secure the WBA light heavyweight title. If this alone isn't enough to entice boxing fans, then Bivol's ex-wife's attempts to cancel him over allegations of domestic abuse, alongside providing an in-depth breakdown of Dmitry's vulnerabilities to Beterbiev, should have contributed to the hype, not to mention the absolute work of art that is the fight trailer.
They danced with death.
In this video, I will briefly cover the boxing styles and principles of the two fighters in question, before examining why the fight will be a box office hit. But first, let's dissect the historical significance of Soviet-style matchups. To obsessive boxing nerds, obviously me not included, the historical background behind the bout is mouthwatering. For almost 70 years, the public was deprived of witnessing the intriguing Soviet boxing style in the professional ranks, with Soviet fighters remaining sheltered behind the amateur system. The only real chances to watch Soviet boxers in full flow came at the Olympic Games, though this avenue always remained shrouded in political fervour and unpredictability in scoring. Alternatively, viewers could tune into the World Amateur Boxing Championships, which often involved major clashes between the USA and USSR between 1974 and 1990. But, although entertaining, the overwhelming feeling when watching these bouts was that America's best were not present, and political bias often detracted from the overall legitimacy. Ultimately, the itch to see an Alexander Yagubkin against Mike Tyson matchup or Alexander Lebziak against Evander Holyfield was never satisfied. Moreover, it was incredibly rare to witness an all-Soviet matchup. It would happen on occasion at the Olympics, but often viewers would be forced to settle for an Eastern Bloc fight, such as the Polish Marian Kaszprzyk's win against USSR's Ricardas Tamoulis in Tokyo in 1964. Any inter-Soviet competitions like the USSR Championships were basically never broadcasted in the West, and Soviet boxing documentaries were hidden away in archives, often to prevent the technique from being analysed. Dmitry Bivol has outright stated that he is a product of the Soviet Union. His parents hailed from the former Soviet republics, being Kyrgyzstan and Moldova, but they met in Russia. Bivol still seems to be proud of his Russian heritage, bearing the Russian flag frequently in the ring, and his boxing style is trademark of that of the Soviet era. Beterbiev, on the other hand, was born in Dagestan, another former Soviet republic. During his amateur career, he fought under the Russian banner, but moved to Canada in 2013 to pursue his professional career. Regardless, due to him learning his craft from an ex-Soviet system and coaches, his style does emulate that of the former USSR fighters, but with some clear alterations. Bivol's style is largely centered around maintaining distance, creating a safe zone while staying on the move and unleashing jabs and an unconventional left hook, often over the guard. To throw off opponents, Bivol launches attacks while moving in reverse or sideways, pendulum stepping with precise timing, and using his ankles and calf muscles to bounce around. Deploying a solid base, he often displays perfect balance while keeping a high guard. I personally love the fluidity of this style, and through examining old Soviet training footage, the resemblance is uncanny. Beterbiev's style is still a product of the former Soviet system, being built upon a wide stance, solid guard, alongside being square at close range. He skillfully uses triggers to get the opponent to lunge forward before successfully countering the movement. For example, he often triggers the opposition by feinting low with a jab before launching a left hook to the head. His general technique is more up for debate, as he shows a unique mix of being a boxer puncher and a calculated brawler. Although he still uses the classic in and out motion, I feel he's more pragmatic with it, retreating when necessary but viciously coming forward with straight successive jabs when he feels the time is right. This then leads to him swarming, even smothering his opponent with short hooks primarily. In my view, it's a strange blend of the Russian and Japanese styles, somewhat similar to Golovkin. Essentially, we're about to see a fight on the world stage involving two techniques which have been largely omitted from the mainstream boxing narrative, a Soviet versus quasi-Soviet matchup, and the fact that it's to determine the undisputed light heavyweight champion is simply special. Now let's cover the Soviet principles instilled within these fighters. In terms of training, Bivol and Beterbiev literally deploy many old methods which are prevalent throughout old school Soviet boxing documentaries. Soviet scientist Filomenov conducted a study revealing that the use of legs when pushing off was responsible for boxers producing 38.46% of the power of the punch. Trunk rotation was the second greatest at 37.42%. Consequently, to refine this movement, the medicine ball rebounder exercise was a staple in Soviet training, and which, like their ancestors, both boxers have readily implemented. Similarly, much of the Soviet training was characterized by functional movements, often performed without fancy equipment or state-of-the-art technology. When combined with the raw elements of the outside world, the training served to foster stamina, grit, and strength. Both Beterbiev and Bivol choose to shadow box and train outside, battling the elements to garner resilience and be at one with nature. In Nikolai Lyubomirov's 1967 book, A Story of Soviet Sport, he boldly states that Soviet sportsmen have never underestimated or exaggerated the sporting achievements of other countries or athletes. Instead, he claims they seek to remain humble and put in hard study to learn from others. Now, this is a very speculative statement, but there is evidence to suggest why humility was likely a Soviet principle. James Riordan's Soviet Sport book highlights the GTO program and ranking system for all athletes. To gain a high rank in boxing, the requirements were stringent, with Riordan highlighting that the 1977-80 classifications stipulated that to become a Master of Sport international class, the boxer had to be among the first 8 in the Olympics or World Championships, or among the first 3 in the European Championships. Effectively, you must earn the title before you can even think of being cocky, and there were often still fighters ranked above you either way. Through being developed by the Soviet program, you can see this humility and humbleness resonate from Bivol and Beterbiev.
Light heavyweight, but I don't feel myself that I'm the king today. No, I just beat Canelo, I just better than him today.
On my training camp, I think my opponent is the dangerous opponent in the world. These thoughts help me to be in focus, to be serious in my training camp, and of course he's one of the dangerous opponent.
Arthur has an incredible discipline of life, you know, like he's obviously his religion too. He's very disciplined, you know, like no alcohol. He doesn't party. He's a happy man with the simple pleasure of life, and that's what I admire on him.
Obviously, if the reports from Bivol's wife do turn out to be true, then this largely wrecks this notion, but for now, both boxers appear to embody the true spirit of humble Soviet warriors of the olden days. One of the cornerstones of the Soviet Union was that its people would have vitality and energy, mainly provided from physical exercise. At least this is what the state's founder Vladimir Lenin declared at the Third Congress of the Young Communist League in 1920. As the century progressed, Soviet scientists took this notion to new levels. Aside from the obvious,
steroids affect the body by enhancing the natural process of muscle building.
Trainers like Nikiforov developed a theory according to which runner Vladimir Kutz's body became capable of bearing any overload if artfully manipulated by diet, sleep and training. Kutz's stamina now resembled that of a machine, able to endure any stresses of sports combat, and evidenced by him setting records in the 5,000 and 10,000 metre races at the 1956 Olympics. What I'm trying to say is that Soviet athletes often boasted ridiculous endurance and stamina levels. By examining Bivol's record, despite being a fairly heavy guy with substantial muscle mass, he regularly goes the distance with opponents, whilst displaying incredible output in later rounds. His bout against Lyndon Arthur was genuinely insane, with him boxing the 11th and 12th rounds as though it was the 1st and 2nd. Beterbiev is harder to judge in this regard due to his 100% knockout record. But the combination of his insane mountain cycling regime and the fact that even in his late 30s he swarmed much younger boxers like Callum Smith and Anthony Yarde underlines natural cardiovascular capacity. Lastly, in Yuri Brokhin's book The Big Red Machine from 1978, he highlights the morphological technique which was used by the Soviets to select young athletes according to biological maturity instead of age. This helps zero in on the sport for which a child is best suited. For example, those with broad shoulders, thick necks and overly long limbs are siphoned off into the boxing circuit. Both Bivol and Beterbiev are evidently genetic freaks with a natural affinity for boxing, so I wouldn't be surprised if the morphological technique was used in their selection. Bivol was naturally a big kid and was encouraged to take up boxing at just 6 years of age, while Beterbiev began later at around 10. Due to him having Dagestani roots, Beterbiev likely descends from the Scytho-Siberian people. Described as tall and powerfully built, skeletons of Scythian elites differ from modern people by their longer arms and legs and stronger bone formation. Equipped with these characteristics, Dagestanis like Beterbiev have the tools to become elite boxers, and his natural power and crazy wrist training regimen is evidence of this. Meanwhile, Bivol boasts long arms which are instrumental in gaining consistent reach advantages, enabling his style to flourish. The point I'm trying to reinforce here is that, in my view, this is the closest we're going to get to see two Soviet-produced warriors battle it out on the professional field. This was something we have been historically starved of, making this battle all the more intriguing. Not only do these boxers adhere to many Soviet fighting methods in the ring, but they simultaneously embody the values and principles of the majority of old USSR athletes. This context will ensure that the bout becomes a tactical chess match where we will see skill meet unrivaled resilience. If you would like to learn more about the Soviet boxing system, I made a more detailed video a few months ago, link will be down in the description below. In terms of my prediction, I feel Beterbiev just about edges it, especially if the Saudis refuse to provide a 22-foot ring, as Bivol's style relies upon space, and he could be forced back onto the ropes like against Canelo. Surviving an onslaught from this position may be perilous, especially against someone who looks to hit all areas. But now I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts. How do you think the fight will go? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed this historical breakdown of boxing matches and fighters' technique. More content will be coming soon. Cheers.